Here we have the rectus sheath, and rectus sheath is basically a covering of the rectus abdominis muscle. It is made up of the aponeurosis of the external abdominal oblique muscle, the internal abdominal oblique muscle, as well as the transverse abdominal muscle. So the aponeurosis of these muscles are what makes up the rectus sheath. And aponeurosis is basically a sheath-like tendon that helps the muscle attach to its origin or its insertion. So as we look at the top picture is shows the arrangement of the rectus sheath above the arcuate line, and we see a arrangement that shows the anterior layer as well as the posterior layer of the rectus sheath. And depending on whether it is on the anterior layer or the posterior layer, what makes up the rectus sheath, the aponeurosis that makes up the rectus sheath, is going to be different. So let's change colors here and let's kind of see how this arrangement is. So this is going to be the anterior layer of the rectus sheath, and we can see that the aponeurosis of the external abdominal oblique muscle is going to make up the anterior layer, as well as the aponeurosis of the internal abdominal oblique muscle is also going to make up the anterior layer of the rectus sheath. Now we also see that the aponeurosis of the internal abdominal oblique muscle is also going to contribute to the posterior layer over here. And we also see that the aponeurosis of the transverse abdominal muscle is also going to contribute to the posterior layer. So to summarize, the anterior layer of the rectus sheath above the arcuate line is made up of the aponeurosis of the external abdominal oblique muscle, as well as the aponeurosis of the internal abdominal oblique muscle. And the posterior layer of the rectus sheath is going to be made up of the aponeurosis of the internal abdominal oblique muscle, as well as the aponeurosis of the transverse abdominal muscle. Now let's take a look at the rectus sheath below the arcuate line. Here we see that the rectus sheath is going to be made up of all three of these muscles. So the aponeurosis of the external abdominal oblique muscle, the aponeurosis of the internal abdominal oblique muscle, and the aponeurosis of the transverse abdominal oblique muscle are all going to contribute to the anterior layer of the rectus sheath below the arcuate line. And on the posterior side, we only see the transversalis fascia. So we don't see any of the oblique muscles and the transverse abdominal muscle there. We just see the transversalis fascia on the posterior side below the arcuate line.